The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm, golden hue over the playground. Children's laughter echoed in the air, but for one girl, it was a sound that seemed out of reach. Leah sat by herself on the swing, her wheelchair beside her, the world around her moving too fast for her to keep up. She had always been different. Her disability set her apart from the other kids. But that didn't stop her from dreaming. It didn't stop her from wanting to be a part of their games, their laughter, their world. Today, however, was different. A group of older kids approached her, their faces twisted into sneers as they made their way over. Leah had seen them before, ruthless, cruel, always looking for someone to pick on. "Look at the crippled girl," one of them mocked, her voice dripping with disdain. "You think you can play with us?" Leah's heart sank. She had hoped just once they might leave her alone. But the taunts kept coming. They circled around her like sharks, their words sharp, meant to hurt. She tried to ignore them, focusing on the motion of the swing beneath her, but the insults kept hitting their mark. "What's the matter? Can't even walk? You're too slow to catch up to anyone." Leah felt the sting of their words, but she refused to cry. She had been through worse before. She had learned to stand strong, even when they tried to tear her down. Then, one of the boys, taller than the rest, pushed her wheelchair. Leah's heart raced, and she tried to grip the arms of her chair for balance. Before she could react, they shoved her, the chair rolling backward, sending her crashing to the ground. The world tilted. The ground scraped against her skin, pain shooting through her arms and legs. Her hands shook, but she pushed herself up, refusing to let them see her fear. "Get up, cripple!" one of the girls shouted, her laugh cruel. "You're nothing." Leah's pulse quickened. She wanted to scream. She wanted to lash out, but the anger inside her burned too fiercely, and all she could do was hold it back. Then, something inside her shifted. A deep, raw instinct took over. She wasn't just going to take it anymore. She had been pushed to the edge. Now, she was going to make them feel what it was like. With a burst of energy, Leah spun in her chair, pushing herself back upright. Her eyes narrowed, and the playground around her seemed to freeze. She wasn't just a girl in a wheelchair anymore. She was something far stronger. Before the bullies could react, she sprang into action. With a swift motion, she twisted the handles of her wheelchair, launching herself forward with surprising speed. The boy who had shoved her was caught off guard as she barreled into him, knocking him off balance. He stumbled backward, tripping over his own feet. The others gaped, stunned by her sudden strength. Leah moved faster than they could react, a force they never expected from someone they thought was weak. Within seconds, the tallest boy was on the ground, clutching his stomach, gasping for air. The girls, in shock, took a step back, their faces turning pale as they saw the power Leah had unleashed in those brief moments. Her confidence, her strength, it was more than they could handle. The one who had laughed earlier looked down at the boy on the floor, his face now twisted in pain. You're just a little girl," she stammered, her voice trembling. "Not anymore," Leah snapped, her voice strong, her eyes blazing with something more than anger, something like victory. The bullies, once full of arrogance and pride, were now the ones crying on the ground. They had underestimated her, thought she was helpless. But Leah wasn't the helpless girl they imagined. She was strong, stronger than they ever thought possible. And as the other kids watched, too stunned to intervene, Leah rolled her chair slowly back to the swing. She didn't need to say anything more. Her message had been delivered. She had fought back, and she had won. The playground fell silent, and for the first time in a long while, Leah felt like she truly belonged. The aftermath of that moment was almost surreal. Leah sat still in her wheelchair, her hands gripping the armrests tightly as she looked at the group of bullies sprawled on the ground, their faces flushed with humiliation. The air was thick with silence, the kind of silence that felt more deafening than noise. The taller boy, who had once pushed her so cruelly, was now clutching his side, groaning in pain. His friends, the girls who had laughed and jeered at her, sat frozen in place, their expressions a mixture of fear and disbelief. None of them had expected this. They thought Leah was weak, an easy target, someone to push around. But what they didn't realize was that her strength had always been there, lying dormant, waiting for the right moment to be unleashed. Leah's breath was steady, her body still as she absorbed the moment. For the first time, she didn't feel scared. She didn't feel small. She felt powerful, empowered by her own defiance. The silence stretched on until one of the girls, her voice shaking, finally spoke up. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she said, staring at Leah in disbelief. "You're just a crippled girl. Why did you do that?" Leah's gaze locked onto hers, and for a brief moment, the girl's confidence faltered. She was no longer the one in control. Leah, despite everything they had thrown at her, had taken charge. "I'm not a cripple," Leah said, her voice steady but sharp. "I'm a fighter, and I'm not afraid of you anymore." The words seemed to hit the group harder than any physical blow could. They couldn't understand how someone they had tormented so relentlessly could stand before them so confidently, without fear. Their world had just been turned upside down, and they weren't sure how to react. For a moment, it felt like the bullies wanted to retaliate. One of the girls started to rise, her hands trembling as if she were preparing for another confrontation. But she hesitated, glancing at her friends who were still on the ground, nursing their bruises. No one moved. No one dared to challenge Leah again. Leah's heart raced, not from fear, but from the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She had taken a stand, and she knew that this moment was bigger than just this playground, bigger than the bullies in front of her. It was a message, not just for them, but for everyone who had ever underestimated her. "I've been through worse than you'll ever know," Leah continued, her voice cutting through the silence. "You're not the first ones to try and bring me down. But guess what? I'm still here, and I'll always stand up, no matter what." The bullies who had once made her feel small now looked like the ones who were defeated. They had no answers, no words left to say. For the first time, the power had shifted, and it wasn't in their favor. Leah took a deep breath, her gaze softening. She could have continued. She could have kept pressing them down, but she didn't want to. This was about showing them her strength, not about hurting them. They had already learned their lesson, at least for today. Turning her wheelchair, Leah began to roll away. She didn't need to look back. She didn't need to prove anything else. She had already won. But before she could get far, a voice called out behind her. "Wait," the same girl who had spoken earlier said. Her voice was quieter now, less hostile. I'm sorry." Leah paused but didn't turn around. She didn't need to see the apology. She didn't need their words. But what she did need, what she wanted more than anything, was for them to understand the lesson. Not for them to feel sorry for her, but for them to see the humanity in her. "Sorry doesn't change anything," Leah said, her voice steady as she faced forward again. "But thank you." She continued rolling away, her pace slow but purposeful. This was her moment of victory, one she would carry with her long after this day ended. As she reached the edge of the playground, the children who had witnessed the scene began to murmur amongst themselves. Some were in awe. Some were unsure of what had just transpired. But Leah knew one thing for sure. Things would be different now. The bullies had learned their lesson, and she had learned hers as well. No matter how hard the world tried to knock her down, she would always rise. Because she wasn't just a girl in a wheelchair anymore. She was a fighter, and no one would ever forget that.